The desert was quiet, but it was not peaceful. The sun burned high in the sky, showing no mercy to the land below. The heat had reached 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and the air felt heavy and dry. The sand stretched far in every direction, cracked and pale, as if it had forgotten the feeling of rain. Even the wind felt hot as it moved across the open ground. In this harsh place, a mother donkey walked slowly. Her steps were careful, and her head stayed low. Dust clung to her coat, and her breathing was deep but tired. Behind her followed 2 small foals. They were young and weak from the heat. Their legs shook with every step, and their ears drooped. Still, they stayed close to their mother, trusting her completely. The mother donkey had lived in the desert all her life. She understood its dangers. She knew how to find shade and when to rest. But this day was different. The heat was stronger than anything she remembered. The ground burned her hooves, and the foals struggled to keep moving. One foal slowed down and stopped. It lowered its head and stood still. The other foal stayed close, pressing its side gently against its sibling. The mother donkey stopped and turned around. She walked back to them and touched the tired foal softly with her nose. Her eyes showed worry and care. She knew they could not stay where they were. The desert offered little help. There were no trees nearby, no rocks large enough to block the sun. Water was far away. The mother donkey lifted her head and looked toward the horizon. Her eyes searched the land carefully. In the distance, something stood out against the endless sand. It was small but clear. A wooden cabin stood alone, weathered by time and sun. Its walls were faded, and its roof looked old but strong. To the mother donkey, it meant shade and possibly water. It was a chance. She made her decision. The mother donkey began walking toward the cabin. Her pace was slow but steady. She did not rush, knowing the foals could not move fast. She stayed close to them, guiding them with gentle movements. The foals followed, trusting her every step of the way. Each step felt long. The heat pressed down harder as they moved. The foals stumbled more than once, but the mother stayed patient. She paused when needed and encouraged them forward. Her strength came not from her body, but from her purpose. Inside the cabin, a cowboy named Tom rested. He was a quiet man who had lived in the desert for many years. He understood the land and respected it. That day, the heat had forced him to stop his work early. He sat inside his cabin, wiping sweat from his face and sipping water from a metal cup. The cabin was simple and small. There was a wooden table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed, and shelves filled with tools and supplies. The windows were partly covered to keep out the heat. The air inside was warm but bearable, much cooler than outside. Tom sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the desert. There were not many. The wind brushed against the cabin walls, and the old wood creaked softly. He closed his eyes for a moment, thankful for the shade. Then he heard something unusual. Soft footsteps came from outside. Slow and careful. Tom opened his eyes and frowned. Visitors were rare in this place, especially animals during such extreme heat. He stood up and walked toward the door. Tom opened the door slowly. What he saw made him pause. A mother donkey stood right in front of the cabin. Her ears were low, and her body showed signs of exhaustion. Behind her stood 2 small foals, pressed close together. They did not run or make noise. They simply stood there, as if waiting. Tom looked around, expecting to see someone nearby, but the desert was empty. The donkeys had come alone. The mother donkey took a small step forward. Her movement was calm and careful. She showed no fear, only need. Her eyes met Tom's, steady and quiet. Tom felt a deep sense of respect. He had seen animals struggle in the desert before, but he had never seen one walk up to his cabin like this. He understood what she was asking, even without words. He stepped back and opened the door wider. The mother donkey hesitated for a brief moment, then walked inside. The foals followed her closely. Their hooves made soft sounds on the wooden floor. They stayed near the door, unsure but clearly relieved to be out of the sun. Tom closed the door gently behind them. The cabin became quiet again. The heat outside stayed trapped beyond the walls. Tom moved slowly, not wanting to frighten them. He picked up a metal bowl and filled it with clean water. He placed it on the floor a short distance away and stepped back. The mother donkey looked at the bowl. She sniffed the air, then walked toward it. She lowered her head and drank slowly. The foals watched her closely. After a moment, they joined her, drinking carefully but eagerly. Tom leaned against the wall and watched. He said nothing. He knew this moment was fragile. Trust like this was rare. The donkeys drank quietly. Their breathing began to slow. The tension in their bodies eased. The shade and water were already helping. Outside, the sun continued to burn the desert without mercy. Inside the small cabin, 3 lives found safety, even if only for a while. Tom knew this visit was not an accident. The mother donkey had made a brave choice. She had trusted a human when she had no other option. That trust carried weight. As Tom watched the mother donkey stand protectively beside her foals, he felt certain of one thing. This day would stay with him forever. And whatever happened next, he would not turn them away. The cabin stayed quiet for a long time. The only sounds were the slow breaths of the donkeys and the soft creak of the wooden walls as the heat pressed from outside. The mother donkey stood close to the foals, her body forming a shield around them. She watched the man carefully, ready to move if needed, but she did not panic. Tom understood that trust took time. He stayed still and gave them space. He sat back down on his chair, keeping his movements slow and calm. His eyes often moved toward the door, thinking about the heat outside. He knew that even shade and water might not be enough if the foals were already too weak. After a while, the foals finished drinking and stood quietly beside their mother. Their legs still shook, but their breathing had become steadier. The mother donkey lowered her head and gently touched each foal with her nose. Her care was clear in every small action. Tom slowly stood and walked toward a shelf near the wall. He took out a small bag of grain. He did not pour it right away. Instead, he placed the bag on the floor and stepped back again. He wanted the donkeys to feel in control. The mother donkey watched closely. She waited. Then she stepped forward and sniffed the bag. After a moment, she began to eat. The foals followed her, taking small bites. Their energy seemed to return bit by bit. The heat outside did not change. The sun stayed high, and the air shimmered beyond the small windows. Tom wiped his face and took a sip of water. He thought about what would happen when the sun finally began to lower. The desert became cooler at night, but dangers still existed. He knew the donkeys could not simply be sent back into the desert right away. The foals needed time to recover. The mother needed rest. Tom decided to let them stay. He opened a small window to allow some air to move through the cabin. The breeze was warm, but it helped. He then sat on the floor, keeping his distance, showing the donkeys that he meant no harm. Time passed slowly. The mother donkey eventually lay down, careful and protective. The foals curled up close to her side. Their eyes closed, and soon they were sleeping. The exhaustion of the day caught up with them. Tom watched quietly. He felt a sense of responsibility settle on him. He had chosen a life in the desert, but these animals had been forced to endure it. Their survival now depended on the choices he made next. As the afternoon moved toward evening, the sun began to sink. The light coming through the windows softened. The temperature inside the cabin dropped slightly. The foals stirred and opened their eyes. They stayed close to their mother, but their movements were stronger than before. The mother donkey stood and stretched. She looked toward the door, then back at Tom. Her ears moved slightly, as if she were listening. She seemed to understand that the danger of the day had passed, but the future was still uncertain. Tom stood up slowly and walked outside. The air was still hot, but less harsh. He looked around the land. He knew of a small water source not far from the cabin. It was not much, but it was enough for animals. There was also a low hill that provided shade during part of the day. He returned inside and looked at the donkeys. He spoke softly, not expecting them to understand the words, but hoping they would understand the tone. "You can stay until morning," he said gently. The mother donkey watched him closely. She did not move toward the door. She stayed where she was, choosing safety over distance. As night slowly arrived, the desert changed. The sky darkened, and the heat began to fade. Stars appeared, bright and countless. The wind grew cooler. Tom prepared a small area near the corner of the cabin with old blankets. He did not touch the donkeys. He simply placed the blankets on the floor and stepped away. The mother donkey guided the foals toward the corner. They lay down together, resting on the soft ground. It was the first true comfort they had felt all day. Tom lay on his bed, listening to the quiet breathing of the animals. He thought about how strange the day had been. A simple afternoon had turned into something meaningful. In the middle of the night, one of the foals stirred and let out a soft sound. The mother lifted her head at once, alert. Tom sat up as well, ready to help. But the foal settled back down, and the cabin returned to silence. Morning came slowly. The sky outside turned pale, and the first light touched the land. The desert looked calmer, almost gentle. The heat had not returned yet. Tom woke early and stepped outside to feel the air. It was cool enough to move safely. He knew this was the best time for the donkeys to travel, if they chose to leave. When he returned inside, the mother donkey was already awake. She stood near the foals, watching him. There was a calm strength in her presence. Tom filled the water bowl again and placed it on the floor. The donkeys drank quietly. When they finished, the mother donkey looked at the open door. She took a few steps forward, then stopped. She turned her head and looked back at Tom. The moment felt important. It was not fear. It was acknowledgement. Then she led the foals toward the door. They stepped into the morning light, moving slowly but with more strength than before. Tom stood in the doorway, watching them walk toward the open land. He did not know if he would ever see them again. But as the mother donkey reached a short distance away, she stopped. She turned and looked back one last time. Her ears lifted slightly. Then she continued on. Tom stayed there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the experience. He knew the desert would always be harsh. But sometimes, kindness could make a difference. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert. Its light was soft, not yet sharp or burning. The land looked calm for a short while, as if resting after the hard day before. The mother donkey walked carefully across the sand, leading her two foals. Their steps were stronger now, and their heads were held a little higher. The rest from the cabin had helped them more than Tom had hoped. Tom stood outside his cabin and watched until they became small shapes in the distance. He felt relieved, but also thoughtful. He knew the desert never promised safety for long. Even strong animals faced danger if the heat returned too quickly or if water became scarce again. After some time, Tom returned inside his cabin. He cleaned the water bowl and put away the blankets. The quiet felt different now. The cabin seemed less empty, as if the presence of the donkeys had left something behind. He went about his morning tasks, but his thoughts stayed with the animals. As the sun climbed higher, Tom decided to ride out and check the small water source he knew about. He wanted to make sure it was still flowing. If the donkeys had gone that way, it could mean the difference between life and struggle. He prepared his horse and set out across the desert. The heat had not reached its peak yet, but it was already growing stronger. Tom rode slowly, watching the land carefully. He noticed tracks in the sand. Small hooves. Fresh. He followed them. The tracks led toward the low hill he had thought about the night before. The hill provided shade during part of the day, and near its base was a shallow water source. When Tom reached the area, he felt a sense of relief. The mother donkey and her foals were there. They stood near the water, drinking quietly. The foals moved with more confidence now, exploring the ground nearby. The mother donkey stayed close, her eyes alert, but she did not panic when she saw Tom approach. Tom stopped at a distance. He did not want to scare them or make them feel chased. He stayed still and waited. The mother donkey lifted her head and looked at him. She recognized him. There was no fear in her eyes, only caution. She had trusted him once. That trust had not been broken. Tom dismounted and stayed where he was. He spoke softly, more to the air than to the animals. "This place is safer," he said gently. The mother donkey seemed to relax. She returned to drinking water. The foals played for a moment, bumping into each other lightly. It was a simple sight, but it filled Tom with quiet joy. He stayed for a while, watching. He noticed how the foals moved more freely now. Their legs no longer shook, and their breathing was easy. The water and rest had given them strength. As the day went on, the sun grew hotter. The shade from the hill became smaller. Tom knew the heat would soon return with full force. He made a decision. Tom returned to his horse and rode back to the cabin. He gathered extra water containers and a bag of grain. He also took an old cloth to create more shade. Then he rode back to the water source. The mother donkey watched him approach again. This time, she did not move away. Tom placed the water containers near the edge of the shade and stepped back. He poured some water into a shallow dip in the ground. The donkeys approached carefully and drank. Tom set up the cloth between two rocks, creating a larger shaded area. It was not much, but it helped. The foals rested under the shade, lying close together. The mother stood nearby, watching the land. Tom sat on a rock a short distance away. He knew staying too close might make her uneasy. Hours passed slowly. The heat rose again, but the shade and water helped. Tom stayed, even though the sun burned his skin. He felt responsible now. As the afternoon wore on, a distant sound broke the silence. A low rumble came from far away. Tom looked toward the horizon. Dark clouds had begun to form. A desert storm was coming. Storms in the desert were rare, but when they came, they were sudden and powerful. Rain could bring relief, but it could also bring danger. Tom stood and looked at the donkeys. The mother donkey had noticed the change in the air. Her ears moved, and she shifted her position closer to the foals. Tom knew the open land near the water source would not be safe during a storm. Flash floods could form quickly. He thought about the cabin. It was sturdy and on higher ground. He slowly approached the mother donkey, keeping his hands visible. He did not rush. He pointed gently toward the direction of the cabin and then back at the sky. The mother donkey watched him closely. She understood danger. She understood urgency. The first drops of rain fell. They were light at first, tapping the sand softly. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and earth. The mother donkey made her choice quickly. She moved toward the direction Tom had pointed, guiding the foals ahead of her. Tom felt relief wash over him. He mounted his horse and followed at a careful distance, making sure not to push them. The rain grew stronger. The wind howled across the land. Sand and water mixed, making the ground slippery. The journey back to the cabin felt longer than before. The foals struggled at times, but the mother stayed steady. Tom stayed close enough to help if needed, but far enough to respect their space. When the cabin finally came into view, Tom urged them forward with gentle movements. The mother donkey led the foals straight to the door. Tom opened it quickly. They stepped inside just as the rain began to fall heavily. Water poured from the sky, pounding the ground outside. Inside the cabin, the donkeys stood together, safe once again. Their bodies were wet, but they were calm. Tom closed the door and leaned against it, breathing deeply. He had made it in time. The storm raged outside, but inside the small cabin, there was safety, trust, and quiet strength. This time, the mother donkey did not stand near the door. She moved deeper into the cabin with her foals. She had chosen to stay. The storm lasted through the night. Rain struck the cabin roof with steady force, and the wind pushed hard against the wooden walls. Inside, the light from a small lamp cast soft shadows. The mother donkey stood close to her foals, her body relaxed but alert. She no longer watched the door with worry. She trusted this place now. Tom dried himself and moved quietly. He placed more water in the bowl and spread fresh cloth on the floor. He kept his distance and spoke in a calm tone. The donkeys listened, not to the words, but to the steady sound of his voice. The foals lay down and rested, tired from the long day. As the storm continued, Tom thought about the land. Rain was a gift in the desert, but it could also change paths and wash away familiar signs. He wondered where the donkeys had come from and where they might go when the storm passed. He knew he could not keep them forever, but he also knew he could help them prepare. Near midnight, the rain softened. The wind slowed. The desert grew quiet again. Tom checked the door and the windows. Everything held strong. He returned to his bed and rested, listening to the gentle breathing of the animals. Morning arrived with cool air and clear light. The storm had cleaned the sky, and the land looked new. Small pools of water rested in low places, shining in the sun. The desert smelled fresh, a rare feeling. The mother donkey stood and stretched. The foals followed her lead. They looked stronger than before, their movements confident. Tom rose and greeted the day with a calm heart. He opened the door slowly to let fresh air in. Outside, the ground was damp. Tracks from the night were clear. Tom smiled, knowing travel would be easier now. He filled the bowl again and added grain. The donkeys ate quietly. Tom decided to guide them to a safer route. There was a wide path that led toward greener land after the rains. It was longer, but it offered more water and shade. He believed the mother donkey could sense the way, but a gentle guide might help. He stepped outside and prepared his horse. He did not rush. He returned to the door and waited. The mother donkey approached on her own. She paused, then stepped outside with the foals. The air was cool enough to move. They set off slowly. Tom rode at a distance, keeping pace. The desert looked softer now. Plants lifted their heads, and birds returned with quiet calls. The foals walked with ease, stopping now and then to explore. As the sun climbed, clouds drifted across it, giving breaks of shade. The path led toward a shallow valley where rainwater had gathered. Tom stopped at the edge and dismounted. He let the donkeys approach first. The mother donkey checked the ground and then led the foals to drink. Tom stayed back and watched. The scene felt right. This place could support them for some time. He gathered stones and marked a clear route along the valley, a sign of safe passage. He placed extra water nearby and stepped away. He wanted the choice to remain theirs. The mother donkey lifted her head and looked around. She seemed to understand the change. This land offered space and resources. The foals moved freely, their ears high and curious. Tom felt a quiet pride. He had helped without forcing. He had respected trust and allowed it to grow. As the day warmed, he prepared to leave. He walked his horse back a short distance and turned to look one last time. The mother donkey stood near the water, watching him. She did not follow. She did not retreat. She simply watched. Tom raised his hand in a small gesture. He did not speak. He mounted his horse and rode away, confident in his choice. Behind him, the desert continued its slow rhythm. Water reflected the sky. Life moved forward. By late afternoon, Tom returned to his cabin. He felt tired but content. He cleaned his tools and rested. The cabin felt peaceful, filled with a sense of purpose. As evening came, he stepped outside and looked toward the valley. He could not see the donkeys from here, but he felt their presence in the land. He trusted they would find their way. The stars appeared again, bright and clear. The desert cooled. Tom sat quietly, listening to the night. Far away, the mother donkey guided her foals to higher ground as the water settled. She chose a spot with soft earth and shelter from the wind. The foals lay down and rested, safe and strong. The storm had changed the land, and kindness had changed their path. The new day began quietly. The desert rested under a pale sky, still cool from the night. A soft wind moved across the sand, carrying the fresh smell left by the rain. Far from the cabin, the mother donkey stood on a small rise, watching the land ahead. Her two foals stood beside her, alert and strong. They were no longer weak or tired. Their bodies showed new strength, and their steps were steady. The mother donkey moved forward, leading them toward open ground. She chose her path carefully, avoiding low areas where water had once gathered. She understood the desert well. She knew when to move and when to rest. The foals followed closely, learning from every step she took. As the sun climbed, light warmed the land. Small plants pushed through the sand, taking advantage of the moisture before it disappeared. Birds moved between rocks, and insects buzzed softly in the air. Life returned in quiet ways. At his cabin, Tom stepped outside and stretched. The morning felt calm. He looked toward the distance, thinking about the donkeys. He had not seen them since the day he guided them to the valley, but he felt certain they were doing well. Tom prepared his horse and rode out for his daily check. He moved slowly, letting the cool air last as long as possible. As he rode, he noticed signs of change. The storm had shaped the land, creating new paths and clearing old ones. Near a bend in the terrain, Tom spotted fresh tracks. 3 sets. 1 large and 2 small. They moved with confidence, not rushed or scattered. He stopped his horse and studied them. The tracks led toward higher ground. Tom smiled quietly. He felt no need to follow. The signs told him everything he needed to know. The donkeys were strong. They were moving forward. He turned his horse and headed back toward the cabin, satisfied. Far ahead, the mother donkey led her foals toward a stretch of land with scattered rocks and low hills. Shade appeared in patches, enough to rest when needed. She stopped near a cluster of stones and let the foals drink from a shallow pool left behind by the rain. The foals played briefly, nudging each other and circling around their mother. She watched them with calm attention. Her body stayed relaxed, but her eyes remained sharp. She never stopped guarding them. As the day warmed, she guided them into shade. They rested, saving energy. The desert required patience, and she had learned it well. Days passed, and the journey continued. The foals grew more confident with each mile. They learned how to listen to the land, how to find safe ground, how to follow their mother's lead without question. One evening, they reached a wide area where the land changed color. The soil was darker, and plants grew more freely. Water was not far. The mother donkey slowed her pace. She knew this place. It was not perfect, but it offered opportunity. They stayed. The foals explored carefully, staying within sight. The mother allowed it, knowing they needed to learn independence while remaining protected. The desert tested all who lived in it, but it also rewarded those who learned its rhythm. Back at the cabin, Tom noticed changes in himself as well. He moved through his days with a lighter heart. The memory of the donkeys stayed with him, reminding him that even in harsh places, trust could grow. Sometimes he left water near the edge of his land, not knowing who might need it. He fixed broken fences and cleared safe paths, small acts that felt meaningful. Weeks later, while riding near the far boundary of his land, Tom saw movement in the distance. 3 shapes moved slowly across the horizon. He stopped and watched. The mother donkey stood tall. The foals were nearly grown now, their steps sure and strong. They moved with purpose, no longer searching, but choosing. They did not come closer. They did not need to. Tom remained still, respecting the space between them. He felt a deep sense of peace. The bond formed in that small cabin had done its work. It had given strength, not dependence. The donkeys continued on their path and slowly disappeared from view. Tom stayed where he was for a long moment, listening to the quiet. Then he turned and rode home. That night, the desert sky filled with stars. The air cooled, and the land settled into rest. Somewhere beyond the hills, the mother donkey and her foals rested together, safe and united. The desert remained the same in many ways. It was still wide and demanding. But within it, lives moved forward with strength and care. A mother's courage had guided her young through danger. A simple act of kindness had offered support without control. Nothing more was needed. The desert carried on, and so did they.